Hey, Teddy K here for the Best Buy blog. In this video review, we take a look at the Nikon Z50 or Z50, Nikon's first mirrorless camera with an APS-C sensor and compatible with Nikon Z-mount or Z-mount lenses. The Nikon Z50 or Z50, depending on where you are in the world, is a mirrorless camera that I think I would describe as a step up. So if you have a smartphone or even an entry-level DSLR, and you're looking for something arguably a little smaller, but something very capable, this could be a camera that you might be interested in. Now, it's up against stiff competition, which I'll get into a little bit, but it can shoot very well depending on what it is you're looking to shoot. I think one of the first things that stands out about this is how lightweight it is. So without the lens, this is 394 grams. It's about 506 if you count the 16 to 50 millimeter lens that comes with it. That's pretty lightweight. I mean, there's some lenses that are heavier than that, but Nikon did a good job here, at least establishing a pretty firm hold. So the grip is really, really nice. There are two function buttons here right around the lens, which are a little bit more, you have to be a little more dexterous to get to those, but I understand the space limitations here, and there are even enough physical buttons in the back. I would have liked the joystick to at least control the focal point on the screen, but unfortunately you have to use the D-pad for that. So, again, there's always going to be some trade-offs, I think, when you're dealing with a camera this size. Luckily, I was able to shoot quite a bit with it before the COVID-19 pandemic, and I got a really good sense of how well this shoots in a number of different situations. So, for the most part, I mean, because this is an APS-C sensor, it's not going to match what a full-frame camera can do, and that's fine. I mean, it's also a relatively small sensor size, 20.9 megapixels. So again, not huge, but at the same time, good enough, I think, for most shooting situations, I would think. Again, it's also prefaced on what kind of photography you're looking to do. If you're looking for something more advanced, this may not be quite it, especially on the mirrorless side, given that Nikon already has the Z6 and Z7, which are full frame. So that being said, there are some things here that I think, because I'm looking at this camera as a graduated device, there are some features in here. I think it's well worth learning the menu system and learning some of the features that are in there. Now, you already have the face and eye detection that's already in there, but I'm looking at something like set picture control and manage picture control. So this allows you to shoot in a number of different presets, but to also create your own and then map those also to some of the function buttons, which is great. So if you are shooting in a certain situation, or you're a hobbyist and you like to shoot a certain way, you can always map those buttons that way. But at least the key thing to me is that you can set presets that are your own. So you can go into a preset that Nikon already has and then make it your own and just save it as your own. So it's very cool. It's a cool feature. It's not new. It's not specific to this camera by any means. Nikon has had in other cameras, but it's one of those things that I think is part of learning this camera. I mean, after all, you do get the effects and you do get a bunch of auto modes here, but don't buy this camera and just shoot in auto. It's not worth it. It really isn't. I think it's worth learning how to shoot in shutter priority, aperture priority, even in full manual. You look at this camera not just as you've graduated to use it, but also that you've got graduated steps as you're using it too. Now, image quality is going to be relative to what you're shooting. So by default, the camera tends to skew a little bit more on the warmer side when it comes to color temperature. You can adjust that with different white balance settings to make up for that. I just found that whenever I was shooting, there was always a little bit too much yellow in there for my liking, but in some cases it works. Like if you're shooting a sunset, that could work really, really well. Now, because it uses UHS-1, memory cards, the buffering and the speed is going to be a little bit of a challenge. So even though the camera can technically do 11 frames per second in JPEG, it's 9 for RAW, you probably are better off lowering that just to make sure that the buffering works in your favor, as opposed to you fighting against it to make sure that you're shooting action. If you're shooting action and you're trying to freeze the shot, that can sometimes be problematic. So that's something to keep in mind if you're looking to get a camera where you're going to be shooting some action shots. And I'm talking about like fast action. If you're shooting your kids, that's not going to be a problem. But if you're shooting something that's a little bit faster, like maybe, I don't know, racing cars or something, you better be prepared for that. So same thing with low light. Low light is also a bit of a challenge. I find that bigger sensors obviously do a better job when it comes to this. So this is not going to match one of the full frame cameras when it comes to night or low light performance, but still it's not bad. And if you're going to shoot long exposure, definitely use a tripod as you would with any other camera, and you will get decent results. They're pretty good. I mean, Again, I definitely skew more towards full frame for that, but at the same time, it's not like you can't get a good shot when it comes to low light with one of these. Battery life is going to be one of those things that you're going to have to struggle with. Now, Nikon rates it at 300 shots per charge, but that is also relative. So that's on the high end. You're probably not even going to get that high. You're going to have to ration your shots. If you're going out all day and you've got one battery to work with, even if it's fully charged, you may have to ration your shots as you go along. So, you shoot, turn it off, shoot, turn it off, things like that, right? You could use a spare battery. That's always a good way to mitigate any battery issues. But the charging is another thing. Now, you can charge through USB. There's a micro USB port for that, but it is slower than charging by putting the battery into its own charging pack that goes into the wall. So bear that in mind. You also cannot use the camera plugged in and then it just basically won't work. It won't charge, I should say. If you're using the camera, so if you're looking to shoot video, for example, and you want to plug in at the same time, unfortunately, that's not going to work. At least for me, I tried it, didn't work. So video, of course, is limited to 30-minute sessions. So if you're shooting 30 minutes straight, it will stop and then you'll have to start again. But that is what it is. So that's another thing to consider. I mean, even also if you've got a smartphone and you're transferring photos over from the camera to the phone, that is also going to sap the battery a little bit too. So all these things come into play when it comes to shooting, especially on a full day. You may want to get the spare battery just to make sure that you don't run into that problem. As I said from the beginning, this to me is a graduated camera. Basically you've got a phone, you've had an entry-level DSLR, or maybe you've had a DSLR and you shot in auto most of the time, you're looking for something that you can learn to do a little bit more with. I think this camera could be it. As long as you recognize that it's got flaws, it's certainly not a perfect camera, and it's got some stiff competition, especially from the likes of Sony and Fuji, who have arguably a stronger arsenal, especially when it comes to the lenses. I mean, when it comes to lenses with this thing, this uses the Z mount or Z mount. You can use the FTZ adapter to use Nikon's other lenses. So again, adding to the cost, but also gives you a lot of flexibility when it comes to the lenses. Now, Nikon is committed to bringing more of the Z lenses out, so that will help. But at the same time, it also limits you in what you can use off the bat. Whereas Fuji and Sony have just an array of lenses that work with their cameras, which is why they have a head start. And that's my review of the Nikon Z50 or Z50. For the Best Buy blog, I'm Teddy K. Thanks for watching.